Folks, be warned, this upcoming review of Gallifrey War Room Allegiance does contain spoilers for Gallifrey Time War Volume 4 that came out in February 2021, because Allegiance in War Room takes place directly after the events of Time War 4 and explains why Romana is not in Allegiance. Okay, so, spoilers there. So, for those of you who do not know, the Doctor Who Big Finish Gallifrey range is one of Big Finish's longest running original excursions into the expanded universe of Doctor Who. They've been doing Gallifrey stories for nearly 20 years now, originally with Louise Jameson and Lalla Ward, and then they got the Time War involved for a bunch of box sets as well, and the Time War sets concluded seemingly last year with Gallifrey Time War Volume 4, which starred Richard Armitage as a character who I have dubbed Hot Rassilon, and also saw the ending of which saw Romana 2, played by Lalla Ward, getting locked into a Matrix dimension, an alternative dimension, because she was wanting to betray Hot Rassilon, and Leela has to now work for Gallifrey's War Room in order to try and get her freedom. Leela is basically now going to be working behind the scenes for Gallifrey, but trying to betray Rassilon, stab him in both of his hearts, and free Romana from her prison in the Matrix. That was where Gallifrey Time War Volume 4 ended. And now we've got Gallifrey War Room, which is now part of a new quartet of box sets which are coming out in the coming years, with Volume 1 Allegiance, which has got a quartet of stories: The Last Days of Freem by Lou Morgan, The Passenger by David Llewellyn, Collateral Victim by Alfie Shaw, and The First Days of Fowdham by Sophie Isles. And Sophie Isles, friend of the channel, artist extraordinaire, they have done a full cast audio drama for Big Finish now. So fans getting involved in the official Doctor Who licenses and the official Doctor Who expanded universe, that's awesome to see. Congratulations to Sophie Isles on their first Big Finish full cast audio drama release. That's awesome stuff, and I can't wait to see what they do in the future. So Gallifrey War Room is basically... There are 4 stories here, but there is the connective tissue of the relationship between Cardinal Rasmus, the General, played by Ken Bones, who we've seen from the TV series, and also Leela, who returns here as Louise Jameson. We've got the quartet of stories here, and we get introduced to the War Room, which is basically the big Gallifreyan High Command where all of their strategic operations are spearheaded during the Time War against the Daleks. And Hot Rassilon and the General have their own meetings there to discuss Leela's role in the War Room. Let's play a quick clip from The Last Days of Freem.
You're quite sure about this, Lord President? She's unpredictable, erratic, even more so since Romana's imprisonment in the Vault dimension.
I was under the impression that she would now be more manageable.
Oh, only after a fashion. We can monitor her, punish her, but we cannot control her.
Not yet, perhaps.
It seems unlikely. She doesn't exactly respond to threats. I think she sees them as something of a personal challenge.
I will leave this in your capable hands, General. She is a blunt instrument. A tool. Nothing more complicated than that. Surely you are more than a match for her.
Well, thank you, my lord. I will certainly try.
I hold you personally responsible for her on this mission, and beyond it. Use whatever force or sanctions you deem appropriate.
Understood. And should I clear those actions with you in advance?
No need. I have every confidence in your abilities, and no desire to spend any more of my time on savages. My attention must be turned upwards, towards ascension, not down in the mud and mire with the lowliest beings.
One thing I do like about these Hot Rassilon installments of the Gallifrey box set is the reference to Ascension, because that was where we saw Rassilon at the beginning of the End of Time, when he wanted to turn the Time Lords into beings of pure consciousness and to ascend into glory, basically. And in the background of these box sets with Hot Rassilon, that is his plan, basically, trying to figure out how to win the Time War and to basically make the Time Lords above everything, including creation itself. I loved Rassilon's characterization in these box sets as well. Not only is Richard Armitage absolutely bloody on fire in both of these sets as well, but he's clearly just a very unhinged and mad individual. And in Gallifrey Time War Volume 4, when he has confrontations with the Emperor Daleks, it was just two god complexes just butting heads with each other. I loved the dynamic, and yeah, Richard Armitage is one of the best casting decisions in recent memory for Big Finish. But in terms of casting decisions as well, you may have noticed on the cover as well, we've got Caroline Pickles as Alystra here, and Caroline Pickles has played the character before, but you mainly will know her from the War Doctor sets as played by Jacqueline Pearce, the late great Jacqueline Pearce. And what's basically happened is that because Alystra has got such great strategic insight and knowledge, they have a version of her from an earlier incarnation played by Pickles, where she is now confined to Gallifrey. She can't leave the city. But she's able to use an older incarnation through a matrix projection to help in the war room, while the older incarnation, Jacqueline Pearce's incarnation, is out in the universe trying to make sure that the War Doctor doesn't commit a genocide every 30 seconds. So it's a really interesting setup and a great new way to like recalibrate the new format of these Gallifrey box sets and to establish a brand new status quo. But thankfully, it's not just all status quo and setup, it is building the relationships between Leela, the General, who you see here, and also Cardinal Rasmus as well, who you will see here as well. This is basically a three-hander between these three characters over the course of the 4 stories. And of course, Louise Jameson is terrific in these box sets as well. She's been doing Big Finish for like over 20 years now, and she has not put a foot wrong. She remains intensely dedicated to the role. And also the Time War stories as well, where she has directed some of the War Doctor Begins box sets, starring Jonathan Carley, standing in for the late great John Hurt. So yeah, with what I like about the Gallifrey sets for Big Finish is that they can take standard like war stories, but put a Time War spin on them, of course, where the morality of and the cause and effect of general storytelling can kind of take a back seat, and you're able to be a bit more experimental and a little bit more fun. Gallifrey War Room 1 Allegiance is not as experimental as some of the other Time War sets like Gallifrey Volume 4 or the War Doctor Begins sets, but it is like a good palate cleanser. It is a good jumping on point for the set, unless you like need to know who Narvin is in order to get some great appreciation from the box set. When it comes to The Last Days of Freem by Lou Morgan, and Lou Morgan's a terrific writer. Lou Morgan is someone whose work I really, really enjoy in Big Finish. She's done a great job like setting the new status quo here and sending them off on a new mission where they're basically trying to do another genesis of the Daleks for this planet called Freem, where it's a planet where the Daleks will subjugate the population and ally with them in order to try and beat the Time Lords in the Time War. So the Time Lords go back in time with Leela and try to stop that from happening by destroying the planet. And Leela, as Leela tries to do, having been taught by the very best, being taught by the Doctor, tries to find out if there is another way and if she does indeed have the right to destroy this planet. It went in some really interesting directions. This was probably my favourite of the set, to be honest. It was a really good and strong start, and a third act which I thought really, really killed it. The moral dilemma that Leela has to go through, and her trying to keep her principles despite everything happening around her. It's what kind of makes her a fascinating character. She's almost like the Captain America of the Doctor Who expanded universe, where you put her in a situation and just her being in that situation in the Time War where morality is so dubious and general storytelling structure kind of goes out the window. You put Leela in one of these stories and she kind of works almost like a reverse virus, just seeing how she impacts and influences the world and the characters around her. It's terrifically done. And the way how they get around the last days of Freem in the story itself in the box set is really clever, and I really, really loved the ending of it. As for the other two, we've got The Passenger, where the Time Lords detect a Dalek ship about to enter Gallifrey. However, there's a Time Lord on board who has lost their memory. There's no Daleks on board the ship. It is just this amnesiac Time Lord, and we do not know if he is friend or foe. I can't really talk about the story much because it is reliant on, is he a good guy or is he a bad guy, and what is the twist here. But it did kind of feel like it was a story with an awful lot of lead up and not an awful lot of payoff. I kind of feel like we needed a few more flashbacks to the Passenger, where he came from, what his rationale and what his motive was, and exactly where he came from. There's a really cool really dark fate for the Passenger. That's kind of all I'll say. That really plays into fan service, but does subvert expectations quite a bit. Like, you almost expect we're going to get an offshoot or a spin-off with a brand new box set about the Passenger, and the rug is kind of pulled from under you. I really appreciated that about the Passenger. But apart from that, it was decent. I liked it. But the tensions start raising a little bit more with Collateral Victim. How do I describe Collateral Victim? Because what's really interesting about it is spoilerific, and I can't really get into it properly. But Collateral Victim builds upon the foundations of The Doctor's Wife, shall we say, and it ends with a really cool, morally dubious act of violence between Leela and Rasmus that kind of puts them on edge for the first days of Faldon, the final story by Sophie Isles. The issue I kind of had with Collateral Victim, and one reason I almost kind of forgot what it was about, I listened to Collateral Victim twice. Genuinely, I listened to it and then was like, wait a minute, did I miss a few scenes? Because the ending didn't quite add up. So I listened to it again immediately afterwards, and then I was like, oh no, it wasn't just me. It just does feel like there are a bunch of scenes missing from this. Collateral Victim, I don't really know what happened here, because there's even one or two times in Collateral Victim where I think a few line flubs even wound up in the finished version, where one character in particular actually started a line, stopped, and then started the line again, and I don't think it was meant to be an actual character flub or a bit of dialogue. I think they actually just put in an outtake in the actual version of the story. But anyway, that's a bit of a nitpick. But yeah, Collateral Victim it's messing around with the 3-act structure and basically storytelling. It reminded me a little bit of Forest of the Dead, where they're playing with the TV show format in the editing, where they say, oh, let's go to the park, and then they cut to the park. And they're like, wait, how did we get here? Oh, we went down the stairs, we got in the car, and we drove. Oh, I don't remember that. It's playing with the editing. It's trying to do that, except without as much sense of place or character. It's a lot harder to do something like that in the audio medium when you don't really have a sense of internal scene geography. And one issue as well, it's kind of going for a bittersweet dark ending, similar to Rewind from the War Doctor Battlegrounds, written by Timothy X. Attack, which is my favourite Big Finish story of the year so far. It's trying to do that, but I don't know how it got to that point. Like I said, I listened to it twice, and it feels like genuinely there's a bunch of scenes missing in the third act. I don't know. It felt a little bit of hodgepodge to me. The performances are really strong. There's some really great ideas. Like I said, it's building upon stuff like The Doctor's Wife and Forest of the Dead. You know, if you're gonna crib, you crib from the best. But it does still feel like it's a little bit ramshackle in its structure. It didn't really do anything for me, unfortunately, which is a shame because it had a lot of really good potential and great performances. But the third act, I don't really know what happened. It just felt really messy. It genuinely just felt like there were a bunch of scenes missing. However, it does end strong. The First Days of Faldon by Sophie Isles, where Faldon was basically this planet which was destroyed in one of the first days of the Time War. However, the Daleks have, for unknown reasons, have decided to bring the planet back. It's now in a different place in space-time as well. Apparently, there's some sort of secret weapon or some sort of secret way to win the war on Falden, so the Daleks have brought the planet back, and it's a race against time between the Daleks and the Time Lords to discover the planet's new location and to try and get their hands on this secret superweapon. It's a really cool idea. Sophie Ellis, I think, does a really great job building upon the foundations from Collateral Victim, where you have the final act between Rasmus and Leela is being built upon in this story as well. Like I said, this box set, it is 4 stories, but that relationship between those two and the General as well, as they try and find a better way to fight the war thanks to Leela, that is the through line of the box set that makes it really worth listening to. But also, if you are a really big fan of the Gallifrey box sets, we do have the return of Narvin, played by Sean Carlson, and Narvin has been like a Gallifrey mainstay for several years. I do not know much about Narvin, but he is a very popular fan favourite character. He's had some stories, some adventures with Ace when she was involved in the Time War as well. So for those of you who are big fans of the Gallifrey box set, it's a very, very crowd-pleasing reunion between Leela and Narvin. Let's play a clip.
So, Romana, is she
dead? No. But only so long as I do as the war room requires.
I had dealings with the General. Seemed a decent sort.
Oh, he is. I cannot say the same of the one in charge, Lystra.
My. So the spider now sits at the centre of her web. Wait, I thought Lystra was 5 galaxies away.
Oh, not the one with flashing eyes and a serpent's charm. This one is more thorny. She bristles with resentment. It is a matrix projection
of her previous self. Rassilon must be getting desperate.
And then there is Rasmus.
Now there's someone who plays his cards close.
If you mean he lies and cheats, that is the one.
What a merry band you must be. At last.
We are through.
As someone who does not have an encyclopedic knowledge of the Gallifrey Big Finish series, the reunion didn't really do that much for me, but I'm sure for fans it is very, very crowd-pleasing. I know that Narvin is in Gallifrey Volume 4. I know he was in the Doctor of War, the Genesis one, the Unbound one with Colin Baker, as the 6th Doctor, now turned War Doctor. So he is a character with precedent, and I fully acknowledge that I do not know or fully understand all that precedent. So that's not for me. That one's clearly for the fans. And Sean Carlson is a lot of fun. I think that fans really do respond and gravitate to the character. So that's awesome stuff. So yeah, this is it's a cool story. And I love how it even seems to draw inspiration to Indiana Jones towards the end. You know, with the Last Crusade, when it's about picking the right weapon. Because when it comes to the weapon that's meant to be on Falden, it's a multiple choice. It is multiple choice, and the Daleks and the Time Lords do not know which one to pick, and it's up to Leela, who has to cut right through the idiosyncratic BS of the Time War to decide which weapon should be collected and which one should dole out the ironic punishment to the Daleks and the Time Lords. It's a cool end to the story. But I do think that out of the 4, Lou Morgan's The Last Days of Freem does come out on top. It does a great job at characterising and setting up the brand new status quo for everybody, whilst also telling a really good Time War story in and of itself. I think it starts strong and it ends strong, and the stories in the middle meander a little bit. This is it's a fine box set overall, but I think when I like my Time War box sets a bit more experimental and a little bit more ambitious, and I think you don't really get that too much in Allegiance. But to be fair, it is a brand new start for the Gallifrey set, and I do think it is a good start to it. But I do hope that they use the War Room premise, the War Room idea, and the characterization of Leela. I do hope that over the coming years, when these box sets come out, they'll be able to experiment a little bit more with that, like they have done in previous Gallifrey sets. So War Room 2, 3, and 4 come out in July 2023, February 2024, and February 2025, respectively. So we're gonna have a very long wait to see how these all pan out. Now, Gallifrey, Time War 4, and Allegiance, War Room 1 Allegiance, they recorded Richard Armitage's stuff at the same time for these, so they are planning these way in advance, way early, because Richard Armitage is a bloody busy bloke, and it's gonna take a long time to see the hot Rassilon regenerate into Timothy Dalton, apparently. But we'll see how the saga unfolds over the next literally 3 to 4 years. But this is a decent start. Like I said, I like my Time War stories a bit more bolder, and I didn't really get those full expectations met in this box set, but it's fine. It's a strong start, and I look forward to seeing where the Time War goes in future. This is something that Big Finish have been doing for like 20 years now, so I hope they're not running out of ideas. I don't think they are, but I think that they need to experiment more with the War Room concept, but this is just one box set. This is just the start of what is hopefully going to be a brand new saga for Big Finish's Gallifrey run. I sound more negative than I mean to. I did like it. I think the only one that I didn't really warm to at all was Collateral Victim, unfortunately. But the other three are really good, especially The Last Days of Freem. And I think that anything with Louise Jameson as Leela in the Time War is instantly elevated by her presence. I think Ken Bones and Richard Armitage have a great interplay with each other as well. I think that there's some really interesting and really cool Time War politics. I think what they did with Allistro is really interesting and novel, and allows Caroline Pickles to formally be like the incumbent Allistra now that Jacqueline Pearce is no longer with us. I also really liked what Sophie Isles did with the Daleks in this box set as well, where they made them kind of like almost like it's kind of like a hive mind thing. I think what Sophie Isles did is that there was a lot of unity with the Daleks and a lot of chanting, but it still gave them a sense of like individuality as well. That's not easy to do, and I think Sophie did a great job characterizing the Daleks in their story. The Daleks only have a audible appearance in The Last Days of Fowden. There's some cool Dalek stuff there as well. Nicholas Briggs hitting it out of the park as always. If you're wanting a Dalek Time War box set, this isn't for you. They are only in one story. This is mainly a Leela and general like quartet of stories, but the Daleks' limited presence on this box set was handled really well.